introduce my guest, we're going to play some few sounds. And as we listen to these sounds, we will situate our discussion on the sounds. First, we take a listen to former President John Mahama talking on projects.
Carriageway, we awarded on contract. The junction at Uhas was supposed to be an interchange. Today I see that they are doing just a runabout. It was not a runabout, it was an interchange. And so if you were going to Uhas, you were supposed to go down and pass under and go to Uhas. Let them build the runabout. When we come, we will put the interchange there.
All right, so you heard Mr. Mahama there talking about projects. We have yet another comment of Mr. Mahama, and this time around, he was talking about the Commander Sugar Factory, which was commissioned when he was president, but has not been functional, I should say. So let's listen to Mr. Mahama again on Commander.
$200 and something million, almost $300 million worth of sugar every year. And they say, you bet me a factory, you produce sugar nibi. Senebeya, you bet say forex dollars na you call amanone echo crash sugar ebano. And they said, look, you ain't mistake. And the first thing, won't see factory ninsi home. Near who's a factory no home. Na you see factory ni na ya pebbles ya no near the ma farmers no. Na farmers na produce sugar cane no to the factory. And when your factory na eden aka raw material. Say factory ni there and sorry and ko bibia. And phase 1 of the project, any factory, no, and you see here, and a phase 2, government of India may another $24 million for sugar cultivation and outgrowers. If you are buying this government buy, you know, say your government's thing in your friend exam facility, and then she share your priorities. Almost buy almost sugar in your priority. And $20-something million, our Indian government say, apply for this for sugarcane raw material. No more apply. And so they left it. In the factory needs now. Jimmy, my basic factory, I will make provision for raw material. I'm not that foolish. Me economics, I was say from.
All right, so you heard there Mr. Mahama again talking about the Commander Sugar Factory. Now, President Akufo-Addo had a response for Mr. Mahama. We take a listen to President Akufo-Addo while he spoke at a radio station during his recent tour of the Central Region.
To accuse him of bungling the matter, he wouldn't be so stupid as to build a factory without
providing the raw material.
So he went ahead, and his strategy was to go ahead and build the factory, and then afterwards go and look for the raw material. I mean, that is against every principle of construction. It's like building a house and saying you're going to start from the roof before you have a foundation. How does the house get built? You're going to start from the roof when you haven't built a foundation. You would think that every industrial activity would begin with, first of all, what you want to do, what you want to build, what you want to produce. Once you've identified that, then it's clearly your next step has to be, what are the inputs? What are the things that you need to be able to feed into your factory to get your output?
Okay.
And you have therefore to be satisfied that when you start your producing, your production, those inputs are there.
Okay.
But we're told by him that that is not his way of looking at things. He will then build the roof, and once the roof has been built, then he will come down and then lay the foundation. You know that a house that is built from that principle will collapse, just as Commander collapsed.
All right, so you heard the President Akufo-Addo also responding to what is now called the Commander politics. Okay, so my guest today in the studio are Kojo Frimpong. Kojo Frimpong is government spokesperson on infrastructure. A very good evening to you, Kojo.
Thank you very much, Wilberforce, for having me. I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Always, always.
All right. And my very good friend here, Emmanuel Wilson, is also here. And Emmanuel Wilson will be introduced as the Chief Crusader, Crusaders Against Corruption, Ghana. A very good evening to you, Emmanuel.
Good evening, my brother. It's been a while.
Yes. It's good to see you.
It's really good to see you. It's also good to see my brother, Kojo.
Yes. I know that there's a chemical relationship between the two of you. I don't want to get involved. All right, guys. So you heard all the comments that are being made by perhaps the two persons who have dominated our political space the last how many years? Maybe 12 years or so. It's been Mahama Akufo-Addo for 12 years now. Anyway, so let's start the conversation. I'll start with you, Kojo. If you read the 1992 Constitution, the chapter 6 of the Constitution, there's the directive principles of state policy. And Article 35, Clause 6C of this particular Constitution says that towards the achievement of the objectives stated in Clause 5 of this article, the state shall take appropriate measures to C, provide adequate facilities for and encourage free mobility of people, goods, and services throughout Ghana. So it tends to be the duty of every administration to provide infrastructure. And so that's the premise upon which we are beginning our conversation. So starting with you, should it really be a big deal if governments provide infrastructure for the citizens?
Thank you very much. And let me say a big good evening to everybody who's listening to the show. I'm a big fan of the show myself, and thank you for the great work that you do. So to the question, should it be a big deal in the political space? My answer is an emphatic yes. Because dealing with infrastructure, dealing with the governance of the country, dealing with the provision of goods and services is a function of vision. What is the vision that underpins these things? How do you visualize? How do you conceptualize? The question to ask is, what are you solving for? So if you're a government and you're given the reins of power and you're supposed to govern, the question you need to ask yourself is, what am I solving for? That becomes the basis of the vision, and that becomes the basis of what you do. So, not to belabor the point, when the president assumed power in 2017, he asked himself this question, what am I solving for? And he says, look, we need to implement a process by which Ghana will not always go to the international community cap in arms. And therefore, he created this big vision, I call it a bold, hairy vision, called the Ghana Beyond Aid. So under the Ghana Beyond Aid banner, what does he do? And he identified about 4 things which were critical if Ghana was going to go beyond aid. One of them was industrialization. And therefore, let's do something called one district, one factory, which in itself, I think, it's an orientative way, or it's an orientated way to say, can we add value to our raw materials, even at the basic agricultural level, all right? Then he said, can we solve for food, just food? Can we just solve for food? So then, planting for food and jobs became something that we're working on, right? And then how do these people move? How do they get access to anything? How do they get access to communication? How do I link Kumasi to Accra? How do I get food to come from the hinterlands to the big cities, right? And then that went into a roads program, so roads, interchanges, all of this, because it is when people move that the economy moves. So these things become a function of the vision that you're working under. And the president's vision was a Ghana Beyond Aid. So the integrative way to look at it is to look at the various components. So how do we solve for food? How do we solve for people movement? How do we solve for industrialization? So it's when you think about these things in such an integrated manner that you start then putting out the projects that will help you to achieve them. So by all means, it's a function of vision, which is important for the political space. You don't want a leader whose vision is atomistic.
So your point is that projects, infrastructure development is a very big deal as far as administration is concerned, looking at our country and our circumstances.
It's a massive deal because it tells you what the person is working on, what is working towards. The projects are a function of the vision that the person has.
Okay, so let me come to you, Wilson. And Kojo thinks that it is a big deal. I don't know whether you also think it's a big deal, but if you think so, it's a big deal. Should it be that political parties that we vote into power claim ownership of these projects that they use taxpayers' money to do?
Wilberforce, before I answer that, I will plead with you to read again the provision that you read earlier.
Okay, so that's it's under the Directive Principles of State Policy, Chapter 6 of the 1992 Constitution, Article 35, Clause 6 and C. So it says that towards the achievement of the objectives stated in Clause 5. And Clause 5 actually talks about the state shall actively promote the integration of the people of Ghana and prohibit discrimination and prejudice on the grounds of place of origin, circumstances of birth, ethnic origin, gender, and religious creed or other beliefs. And so that's the premise upon which Clause 6 is stated. So 6C says that provide adequate facilities for and encourage free mobility of people, goods, and services through Ghana. In fact, there are other provisions. So, like the same Article 35, and you read 7 says that as far as practicable, a government shall continue and execute projects and programs commenced by the previous government. And we'll talk about this later in our conversation.
Very
so
well.
That's the directive principles
Very
of
well.
state
So
policy.
I wanted us to be very clear on the directive principle with particular reference to the operational words, adequate facilities. That is what it says, okay? Now, whether we like it or not, infrastructure is a basic necessity in every economy. Indeed, what we come to realize is that infrastructure is directly linked to the growth of any economy. We have water, accessibility to water, to electricity, road network, health in terms of hospitals, schools, and all that. Not limited to, but if we should specifically identify what goes into infrastructure, you realize that it includes the basic necessities of every human being. And that is very important. When we talk of basic necessities, we are talking of things like water and coal. Indeed, recently you can argue that even electricity is a basic necessity.
Yes.
You understand? So infrastructure goes beyond just the word infrastructure to mean the core of human existence. And that is one thing all of us need to look at.
Just to interrupt, the vice president, ahead of the 2020 elections, talked about infrastructure being both hard and soft. So, for example, he talks about the fact that interoperability is actually considered soft infrastructure instead of hard infrastructure, like seeing a building or being an interchange. The Ghana card, yes.
Which is an identity question. It's infrastructure that you can't perceive, as being solid on the ground. But it's something that is absolutely necessary.
So the first thing I want us to appreciate is that infrastructure is more or less the basic necessity for every human. And by extension, it is the backbone of the economy. Now, if we are talking of the backbone of the economy, we are talking of the fact that it is a necessity for every human being. Then we move on to the next question, and that is where I'm coming to you asking whether or not it is supposed to be politicized, or whether or not politicians are supposed to take credit for that. I would say that if politicians want to do that, That is their their right. They want to do that. But if you ask me, anyone who engages in such thing is just reducing the entire governance to mediocrity. I have heard prior to 2020, and indeed, to be very fair, I think right from 2000, when His Excellency Kufuor took over, that was when we started hearing this debate. I'm limiting it to the Fourth Republic. When we started hearing this debate of saying, okay, so this government came, was able to provide 10. We came and we've done 11. The next government comes, this government did 10 or 11. We did 12. This person did this, we did this. This person did this person did it. Wilberforce, have you realized that in this whole drama, as I want to put it, have you realized that none of these politicians have been able to say that, okay, when we came, the gap was this, and this is how much we've been able to do, or this is the quantity that we've been able to produce? We want to ask ourselves the infrastructure deficits in this country. And I haven't heard any politician make arguments on that. They are rather using themselves as the standard and say that NDC came and did 20. We have done 21, so we've done better. MPP came and did 21. We have done 23, so we have done better. They've reduced the entire thing to, like more of a kids rather deciding or discussing among themselves who is wearing the best of shoe to school. That is the whole argument about. If politicians are truly serious about infrastructure, what I expect the argument to be is whether or not we are managing the taxes efficiently. And you made a comment to the effect that it is the taxpayers' money that is being used. Why should it be an issue? Let me make some references to you. And then we can look at some few things. I'm referring to a research working paper, which has been published on the World Bank website. It is entitled Ghana's Infrastructure, a Continental Perspective. In this paper, the research establishes that $1.2 billion is spent per year on infrastructure in Ghana.
$1.2 billion.
The same research establishes that $1.1 billion is lost each year to inefficiencies. So we are able to burden the taxpayer. We are able to use the name of or the goodwill of the country to go and get grants and loans and all that you can think of. $1.2 billion averagely is used on infrastructure. 1.1 billion.
So almost equal to the amount spent.
Are you getting the point? Almost equal to the amount spent. And so for me, if anyone wants to say that infrastructure should be a major issue, then it shouldn't be the provision of it. It should be the value that is used on it.
Okay.
But strangely, as I said, when you look at all these politicians talking, the debates going on, 2020 elections, His Excellency Dr. Bawumia was one person who was leading that charge, to the extent that I heard the former president, what's the name? John Mahama, even inviting His Excellency to a debate on that. It has been an issue, and no one is talking about whether or not we are using the money that needs to be used, efficiently. No one is talking about that. Now, in 2018, the finance minister went to mid-year review, a budget review, Parliament, and requested for an approval of $2 billion. And this is what the finance minister said. If again you will indulge me.
Yes, please.
To quickly. So he says, Ghana has reached a barter agreement with Sino Hydro Group Limited of China to provide $2 billion to to finance road projects, budget bridges, interchanges, hospitals, and rural electrification in exchange of Ghana's refined bauxite. I mean, we all heard this. What is important for me here is the amount we are trading, or we wanted to trade our refined bauxite.
The $2 billion.
$2 billion.
That's the explanation. I think that was added to that was the fact that it's a portion of the bauxite. Is that the case?
It is that is not even the argument I want to make. What I want to establish, and this is leaning on my first premise of 1.2 billion being used on infrastructure, 1.1 billion going to waste, and we are here going for 2 billion. And so, okay, we want to do infrastructure. To what end? We want to do infrastructure. We are building and all that. Can you imagine that I have a number of contractors, friends, people who were able to execute this Ghana at 50 projects, the building. Mm-hmm. As we speak, some of them have not been paid.
You mean since 2007?
I'm telling you, as we speak, some of them have not been paid. I have friends who have done projects 7 years on, 8 years on, 9 years on. Let me give you a practical example. One example. Just about 2 years ago, I visited a friend, South Labadi here. And I'm into construction, so I have a number of friends who are in that field. And when I visited him, I got there and I was told that he's no more living in that place. I called him, and the explanation was that he did some work for the government to build some hospitals some years back. Mm. He used his house as collateral. Because government has failed to pay him, or government has not been able to pay him, the bank came for the house. Practically, people are dying and homes are collapsing in the name of infrastructure. And no one is elevating the argument to whether or not we are getting value for money.
Okay. So
for me, if you ask whether it should be an issue politically, I would say that anyone who engages in that kind of debate is just reducing the bar. The person is just reducing the bar. If we want to elevate, why should I come and clap for you because I gave you 1 cedi in the form of tax, and you use the tax to do something, and you are coming to tell me to clap for you? You should rather come and tell me that ordinarily 1 cedi could have bought 1 pen. But because I have the vision, and because I am very prudent when it comes to governance, I was able to produce 2 pens for you. That is where I should clap.
Okay. So we're going to wrap the conversation up later on costing of projects and all the finances that go into it and all the loopholes that we hear about. That's where we're going to be discussing. But Kojo, I know you have a lot of things to respond to. But whilst you are responding, we'll also add to the same question that I asked, which has to do with governments and politicians laying claim over projects that has been done instead of it being purposely for the edification, if I should say, of the populace.
I think, I've heard Wilson speak, and I'm wondering where we are on this matter. Because I would like to start off where he ended. That we should rather come and tell him that I gave you $1 and I've used the dollar to produce X and Y. But that's exactly the conversation. It's exactly the conversation. That Pokuase was supposed to cost 84 million. Ordinarily, people have overruns when they do projects like that. Under Nanado, there were no overruns. And indeed, we saved some 13 million off it. That's exactly the conversation. Interoperability was supposed to cost $1.4 billion. $1.2 billion. Baumia comes and says, no, we can't have interoperability at over $1 billion. Let's do it for far less. That's exactly the conversation. The conversation is, how do we tackle Dodo Pepesu Road, which has been in the budget for 20 years? That's exactly the conversation. So I don't know the premise on which he built his argument and the conclusion are very different. It's like night and day. Because what politicians do is that when you give them the reins of government, they are supposed to account to the people their stewardship. So, yes, indeed. And there are some fundamental philosophical questions we need to answer, right? So the directive principles of state says, provide adequate infrastructure or provide adequate infrastructure for the realization of these principles. Question, what is adequate? That is left to the discretion of the person ruling. And therefore, if the president in his vision says that, look, how is it that for 60 or 70 odd years, we can't tell by identity card or by identity who is a Ghanaian? And there's no provision for us to know that this is Mr. Wilberforce Mfum, this is where he lives, this is the kind of work that he's done before, all of this is extremely important for governance, because if we don't know Mr. Wilberforce Mfum, we can't plan for him.
So I'm Wilberforce Asaase.
Sorry, for the soccer.
Yeah, I know you're talking about the football man.
Yes. So if we don't, then we can't plan for him. So the provision of something like the NIA card becomes critical. And if we are able to integrate the NIA card, for example, to become the electioneering card or your voter ID card, and integrate it to become your national health insurance card, right? And you integrate it to become your tax identification number. That is a functional vision that the political person who, under whose tenure this was realized, must take credit for, because it shows you that he's thinking about the country.
So you are talking about soft infrastructure there?
Not just soft infrastructure. Okay. Not just soft infrastructure. I'm talking about the entire provision of infrastructure. There's another thing that he said. $1.2 billion, according to research, is spent on infrastructure. $1.1 billion, according to what he says, goes into inefficiencies. The question is, what is the nature of those inefficiencies? It's a big blanket statement, but what is the nature of those inefficiencies? Is it uncompleted projects? Is it procurement fraud? Is it management inefficiency? Is it over-bloated budget? Contracts? Is it something that we could have done for $1 million that we are doing for $5 million? And it's not wholly true that we don't have a gap analysis in this country. It's not wholly true. We know that we have a deficit of about 2 million homes. We know that. We know that if we were to complete every road project in Ghana, we'll spend north of $10 billion. We know that. So it's not as if we don't know the gap analysis we have in this country. So I want us to pivot towards a certain place where we realize that we elect people to govern. We elect them to govern because we want them to do what will help the country. So if we're talking, and we're even limited it to infrastructure, this must be a question about governance. That indeed, if the core of people's lives, as he said, as he intimated, rest on infrastructure for the provision of goods and services, then when we elect people, we should charge them that give us things that work to be able to facilitate the core of our existence. And therefore, we will question or audit your governance based on the things that we require that you do for us. And then let's peel back one step. What are the things that we require governments to do for us? It goes back to the question, how do we elect government? So why do we elect government? Because there's a small matter of something called a manifesto. So I sell a program to the electorate, and then the electorate, based on that manifesto, make a decision. So when the electorate makes a decision, then the electorate is going to audit my stewardship based on the promise I gave them. And you're saying that, even though I came to tell the electorate that I'll build you an interchange in northern Ghana. And I have built the interchange to facilitate the movement of goods and services in Tamale. I shouldn't take credit for it. And that if I did that, it will be mediocre. You're saying that if I'm able to integrate all these cards and increase the number of people who are paying taxes, you're saying that it's mediocre, so I shouldn't talk about it. You're saying that if we're able to change the motorway into a 10-lane project, and we're able to do it to be able to facilitate movement between and save people's lives on the motorway, you're saying we shouldn't take credit for it. You're saying that if we dualize Accra Kumasi so that things can come quickly for it, because it's part of this N1, you're saying that we shouldn't take credit for it. I mean, I don't understand the premise he built and the conclusion. So I would say that, look, so far as we elect government based on a manifesto, and the manifesto is to further the directive principles of state, we should judge government on that manifesto. And if that manifesto includes providing infrastructure, then you cannot take away the credit from the person under whose tenure this was realized. So let's pivot from infrastructure. Let's pivot from infrastructure. One sec. Okay. Let's pivot from infrastructure and go into something
I'll come to you, Wilson.
Right. Let's pivot from infrastructure and go into something like factories, right? This whole idea of industrialization. Mahama's idea for industrialization was to go to bilateral loans or maybe multilateral loans, take a loan, build a factory, Commander Sugar Factory, right? It doesn't matter whether, I'm not even talking about whether he provided outgrower schemes or raw materials for the factory. Let's understand and question the basic philosophy behind it. He goes, takes a loan, and then comes to put a factory there, right? Nanado says, no, I can't do that because it's not sustainable. I would rather empower business people who have an interest in this country to be able to do the factories. Therefore, I'm putting together a plan called One District, One Factory. If you, a businessman, wants to take advantage of that plan, come, we'll give you 10%. You borrow at 20%, we'll take 10% of it. We'll give you X amount of tax rebates and all of that. We'll help you to be able to establish quickly. There are some things that we'll bring into the space. And then, under 5 years, he has 120 factories up. He has 120 factories up under 5 years, and he's going for 278 factories.
Some people have said that there's a talk about the factories, but they've not really seen them.
Oh, look. So I would say to people that indeed, in a place like Ekumfi, I remember very well when another went to cut the sod for Ekumfi. About 6 months later, nothing had happened there. An NDC person high up in the organization went there with a video, took some pictures and said, look, today Ekumfi is making beer out of pineapple. Their products are on the market. Very soon, the Ministry of Education is going to do a One District, One Factory fair. And you will see visibly that when you enter the shops, some of the things are there. And some of these factories have even started exporting.
But there have been complaints about Ekumfi that the juice is not available. It looks like some people don't find it on the market. That's just by the way.
In fact, the complaint about Ekumfi is that they can't service the market, which is true. Because if you look at the demand for pineapple juice in this country, Ekumfi is just servicing maybe 3-4%, or maybe even under 1%, right?
So they need to build their capacity. Yeah.
The question is to scale up, but that doesn't negate the question of the availability of the project. You understand? Yeah. So I'm saying that whether it's in infrastructure, or it's in industrialization, or it's in agriculture, because we all work basically because of the directive principles of state, everything that we do must go into that space. And the politicians must take credit for it when they do it, and they must face the sword when they don't do it.
Okay, so you are on Asaase Radio, 99.5 megahertz. The program is Press Pass, and my guest today are Kojo Frimpong. He's the government spokesperson on infrastructure, and also Emmanuel Wilson. He is the chief crusader for, is it the Crusaders?
Yeah,
Crusaders against corruption in Ghana. So, Ima, I know you have a response to Kojo's submissions. Yes.
Just some few things. I was surprised Kojo was making all those comments, but it is clear that he followed me at a point and decided that he would now tune in and listen to what he wants to listen to. But listen, I still insist that anyone, politician, who decides to use the other political party as a standard or a yardstick, that person is engaging in a mediocratic activity.
What standard should we use?
So what it is that
in a two-horse race, in a 2 or 3 horse race. Once again,
let me tell you.
I'm just want to further the conversation.
No.
I want to further the conversation.
There were a lot of things I could have furthered. Let me finish.
Okay, yes.
There were a lot I could have furthered when you were talking. Listen, this country doesn't belong to the NDC and the MPP. We talked about directive principle. Unfortunately, as a nation, we don't even have an agenda, a clear agenda. We could have used the agenda as a standard. But where you reduce it to NDC did 2, MPP did 3, MPP did 3, NDC did 4. And so we should clap for them. I'm saying that you are reducing the bar. And I still stand by that. It is totally different from a political party comes and says that I'm going to build 88 hospitals per the party's manifesto. And based on that, you vote for the party. The party ends up delivering 88. I voted for you because you gave me a standard. The standard wasn't the previous government standard. That wasn't it. So when you come to office and you want me to judge you per the previous government standard, you are reducing the bar. And anyone who engages in that person should up his or her game. The other thing we should also know is this. For instance, we were talking about value for money. I don't know if Kojo has document to let us all know the cost that went into the interchange. Is it the Pukwas interchange?
Oh, that has been.
I
think that has been.
I don't have it.
Oh,
I'm not going to. I'm
sure,
not going to argue that.
Kojo, you have the responsibility of providing us with those details.
That's right.
Now I've heard it from the grapevine. Like Dr. Baumia has mentioned it a couple of times.
And you tell me that value for money should not be an issue.
Out at some point in this country.
He's using my words.
He tuned out at some point.
My words.
When we were launching it, he had tuned out.
Now listen.
When you were launching it,
he had tuned out.
You decide that value for money shouldn't be the main conversation. Then again, I tell you that you are reducing the bar. In fact, you have reduced it to 0. Kojo was quick, as I said, to talk about, the interchange. As I said, I don't have the figures.
Okay, but let me ask you something that Kojo said. Let me ask you something that Kojo said as you continue your comment. Right. He says that if a party has a manifesto, like your party, PNC, let's say PNC gets the opportunity to win power, and PNC gives a manifesto, and out of the manifesto, they said we're going to build, let's say, 25 interchanges. And at the end of 4 years, they are able to build, let's say, 22.
That's right.
And they want to go back to the electorate for re-election. Wouldn't PNC use their achievement?
PNC's achievement should be, I came and I did 22 out of 24. Mm-hmm. The reason why probably I couldn't do the 2 was A, B, C, D. So give me a renewed mandate, and I'll pursue it, not just the 2, but I'll add up. But why PNC comes to you and tells you that I did 22, forgetting about the standard, which was the 24, and says that I did 22, but my predecessors did 21 or 20 or something, let's clap for them.
So your problem is the comparison.
You don't do that comparison because when you do that, you are reducing the bar. Okay, that's what I mean. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is Kojo was talking about the making reference to the adequate facilities.
Provide adequate facilities. Yes.
What determines adequacy is the one ruling.
Is that what you said?
I said that is in the discretion of who has the power.
That is not true.
And the reason is
absolutely not true.
And the reason is, so I can explain. So that we understand ourselves.
Yes. So when
I say it's in the discretion, because the Constitution doesn't say what adequate is. And it is only when you have the power, right?
Based on the resources you have.
Based on the resources that you have, that you can provide what is adequate. All right? And in providing adequate, you have to nominate a vision. All right? So, for example, we want to do a Ghana card, right? This Ghana card is extremely necessary for our progress. Okay? But we have tried before, and we couldn't do it. So you need to come in and say, look, we think that by all means, by any means necessary, this is incredibly important for our progress, and therefore, come what may, this is what we are going to do.
So if you have resource A and resource B, and there is competition for A, competition for B, you think that you should do A first.
Yeah, exactly.
What I'm saying is
and
that
actually,
let
just
me
to further the
go back.
conversation.
Let me go back.
No, because
just let him clarify this point, and then you come back.
Clarify.
Yes.
And you see, the thing about political conversations, they take on a life of their own. Okay? So if I'm logged into a political argument with you, it takes on a life of its own. We don't set out to compare. We set out to think about capacity. That if indeed I am president and under my tenure, this is the capacity that I put out. And the only person who in the space, and the only person who in the space is the next guy whose capacity we've seen and whose capacity we can attest to and whose capacity we know is nowhere near ours. You're saying that in that political conversation,
so
there should be no
I'm
comparison.
saying is that
okay,
any
let me listen to Wilson
that decide to compare himself to the achievements of a predecessor, that political party is reducing the bar. That is a fact.
Yeah, and he stands by his point.
That is a fact.
Yes.
If you come and you make an argument and say that my capacity is to build 88 hospitals, and I've been able to build 87 or 80 this or whatever, and give me reasons why I couldn't do the rest, that is a different thing.
Okay.
Are you getting it?
So let's move the conversation.
Let me
all right.
come in.
Please
to
finish.
Finish on this one. Now, Kojo was also talking about the fact that, yes, it is about, I don't know, but like what? Finances comes in, what constitutes efficiency comes in, and all that. He made reference to Ghana Card, for instance. Ghana Card was, or is being done by the current government, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it the one that is being headed by Professor Tifa?
Yes.
When Professor Tifa came to give us the cost, a leading member of the government or the party that is in government came to tell us that when assessment was done, it is clear that the cost per Atifa's position has been inflated.
Oh, he said that?
Oh, were you not there when, what's the name, Kennedy Japan was talking about this?
And you take Kennedy's word to be gospel.
Oh, okay. So Kennedy's,
I'm not saying his word is not gospel.
We shouldn't
but
take
I'm saying to you.
That is fine.
I'm
He's
saying to you that
member.
it's interesting.
It's not coming from an opposition party. It's not coming from an opposition person. The point I am making is that in as much as infrastructure is important, we must put premium on the cost component. Look at this Jack, where are you thin address system that came up. I mean, if we want to be fair to ourselves, is it not running on this Google thing?
Wait, you mean
already in existence?
You mean the whatchamacallit, the
Ghana Post.
The Ghana Post system.
Is it not running on that?
So for that, for purposes of education, I think we need to clarify, and that is that the digital address system is different from Google address system.
Because that comes with some few features, which makes it different. There are two different things. It can, for instance, so the Google map, I mean, it doesn't generate an address. Are you getting it?
Yes.
Ours generates an address. So in other words, ours comes with some additional features. But I'm talking about what it runs on. There are two different things.
Okay, so for example, that will not be for purposes of education. For example, if you go to the United Kingdom, every building has a digital address.
I agree.
It was put there before Google.
I agree.
To the best of my knowledge. And Google has just come to enhance it. And so if you put in the digital address of place
number 10
Downing Street, the Google will take you there because there is existing digital address system. We didn't have it as a country. So I will not, for purpose of education, digital address system is different from the Google system.
We are saying the same.
Okay, all right.
Just like the UK, the address system was there before Google came in, isn't it? Ours came after Google. And I'm saying we have built on Google. We have added some features which Google do not or doesn't have. Are you getting it? Unlike UK that we may say that built from scratch, we didn't build from scratch. That is the point I am making. I get in it. But the most important thing is that what one constitutes adequacy can never be left at the footsteps of those ruling. That is never true. It's misleading. Number two, when you want to talk of infrastructure or you want to have a debate on infrastructure, the yardstick should be your political manifesto, what you promised that you were going to do, and not based on what was done by your predecessor.
Okay, so that point has been made. I'll come to you, Kojo, for
that
yes.
point, you see, there are challenges with that point. Because remember that we are locked in a political system where we go out to vote. So you wear your best clothes and I wear my best clothes, right? And so when we go out to vote and it's a beauty contest, the most beautiful woman is the one who gets the nod. So I'm saying that, yes, indeed, there's a matter of the political manifesto, which we should judge ourselves by, which every party judges themselves by. But then there's that cross-sectional thinking that if I don't vote for A, I vote for B. And therefore, who is this person I'm voting for? So, for example, and I think we should spend some time on this, no matter how belaboring it is. If, for instance, I say, so I was having a conversation 3 days ago in my constituency, and we're saying, we want to do something, right? And we want the top 15 kids in every section to come and then to
compete.
To come and compete. So what are the modalities for the top 15 kids? We're going on and on. And one said, no, but you guys are solving for the wrong thing. And I said, why? He said, because in some places, the top 40 will be better than, in some places, the top 15. Do you understand? It goes to capacity issue and ability issues. So if, for example, I said in my manifesto, I'll build 101 hospitals, and I built 60 complete, and there are 51 left, right? By my manifesto, I would have done maybe 60% or 56%. But that 56% is far better than somebody who said, I'll build 3 and build 3. Do you understand? So it goes to capacity issues and to say that, look, here we are. We have much better capacity to do things, and we have demonstrated it. And that the other person is nowhere close to where we are. And this is a matter of political communication. In many ways, we don't set out to say we are just comparing and you did 3 and I did 4. No, I'm saying that the conversations take on that. But underpinning the conversation is, what capacity do I have? And what capacity does the other guy have, given the resources? What is my level of vision? And what is the person's level of vision?
So with his point, is it not the doing of these same politicians, you the politicians, that has brought us to where we are?
It's inconsequential and it's immaterial. I'm saying that by all means, we should compare the attainment of what we did in the manifesto, and we should also compare with our fellows. Because if you don't do that, if we do not do that,
comparison on their manifesto.
If we do not do that,
how many times?
Then respectfully, I don't know where we are going. Because you see, you have 2 people in a heated exchange, or maybe 3 people in a heated exchange. Maybe I couldn't do 100% of what I set out to do, but my 50% is far better than the other 2 people. And you're saying that we shouldn't compare.
Okay, so ahead of the
I don't understand.
Ahead of the 2020 elections, I know that one of the things that was said by some of our politicians was the fact that election 2020 is going to be about comparison, and that's because the 2 leading candidates have all had the opportunity to be in power for 1 term, and we're competing for their second term opportunity. And so that conversation was there that let's do a comparison. And that's what led the campaign of 2020, that we compare President Akufo-Addo's record.
Even God compares. You see, even God compares. When God gave the parable of the talents, the parable of the talents, he says to them, I gave you 5 and you did X with it. I gave you 3 and you did X with it. I gave you 1 and you buried it. So even God is in the business of comparison.
But the comparison has to do with what was given. In other words, your manifesto, that we voted for you, we gave you the mandate based on what you gave to us.
And that's the manifesto. And that manifesto is achievable based on the resources that you have. So I can't compare. So I cannot compare Ghana to the UK, and I can't compare Ghana to the USA. Glass and Kwan. I can't do that. I cannot do that because our basic needs, the things which are necessary for us, they're very different from the things which are necessary for the US.
They are also talking about infrastructure.
They're talking about
infrastructure. Their infrastructure
Look,
they are talking about is improve the existing.
In 2018, I was involved with some very top-level conversations in the US about the infrastructure rating of the US. And the infrastructure rating of the US is a D. Bahrain, Croatia, all of these people beat the infrastructure rating of the US.
China,
and
Dubai.
That is why Joe Biden has put the $4 trillion, $12 trillion infrastructure regig in the USA. And you are saying that when Joe Biden is able to achieve that, he should not compare it to what the Republicans have done.
Well, because Republicans are frustrating his agenda.
And why are the Republicans frustrating the agenda? Because they know that if indeed Joe Biden is able to do that, the Democrats will rocket through space. Look, in 2016, the last leg of President Mahama's campaign was infrastructure. I built the airport. I built the Bank of Ghana Hospital. In 2020, the last leg of President Mahama's campaign was infrastructure. In 2024, when Agenda 111 comes into effect, when our 6,000 kilometers road project comes into effect, when all of these things crystallize, you're saying that we should not tell the people of Ghana that we possess this capacity more than the NDC. You're saying we shouldn't do that.
Okay,
let me just ask a simple question.
Okay.
Let me just ask a simple question.
We have a few minutes left. I want us to wrap the conversation with finances. So as you make your comment, yes.
2016 manifesto of the MPP. And I'm sorry, I have decided not to do partisan conversations.
Then don't do it.
Sorry to do this.
Then don't do it. If you have decided not to do it, then don't do it.
Let me because of
you're
the
going against your own
decisions.
decisions.
Yeah, because of the tangent.
Don't go against.
No. He says that no.
For instance,
you have to allow Wilson.
MPP manifesto said that they were going to build 88 district hospitals. In 2021, into the COVID, they come and say that they are going to
We didn't say we're going to build 88 district hospitals.
How many hospitals?
In 2016. We never said it.
How many?
We never said it.
How many did you say you were going to build?
I'm saying you are saying to us
how many did
that
you
we said we're going to build
what
88.
I read
we never said it. Go back to 2016. Go back to 2016.
But that is what
manifesto.
I read in the manifesto.
It's nowhere.
So you said
we didn't say you are quoting our manifesto.
That is exactly what
our
I'm
manifesto
doing.
never said.
I am
that
making reference to your manifesto.
Never.
I wish we have the manifesto here to talk.
You can just Google the manifesto. We never said we're going to build 88 hospitals.
So we said we are going to build. No, we. They said they are going to.
True identity.
Of course. I'm not an MP. Why should I? I'm not an MP. Everyone knows that. Yeah. So to say that you are going to build, and because of that we gave you the mandate, as I said, and you come back, and instead of us discussing what was done as against what has been able to done, you were talking about capacity. Capacity here talks about your ability, the resources available. Isn't it? So if I came in and I have 10 cities and I was able to do 1 out of 5, probably I promised 5 and I did 1. And you come in and you are given 100 cities and you're able to do, let's say, 10 out of, say, 20. You promised 20
caveat
or
is
15
wrong.
or
The
whatever.
caveat is wrong. The underlying principle is wrong. What you should say is, if I came in and I had 10 cities and I said I was going to do A, B, C, and you come in and you are able to create 100 cities.
No,
it's the ability to even create.
It is not for you to tell me what to say. It is not for you to tell me what to say.
I mean, respectfully. I think that opinion is wrong. Respectfully.
So you keep that to yourself. That is fine.
Let's still hear
what I'm saying is that you come in and you come to meet, or you have the access to, say, 10 cities. And per my promise of building or giving 5 units, and I end up giving 1, and you come in and you have access to 100 cities, and you end up giving, let's say, 10 or whatever, with comparing to what you promised. Probably you promised 20, you promised 30. You are audacious, whatever you want to call it, or you have the vision as you want to put it. So instead of saying 10, I want to do 50, I want to do 100. And then you come in, you have access to X amount of money. And when you are done, per Kojo's own analogy and logic and per his own submission, looking at capacity. So your capacity was different from mine. And then at the end of the day, you are telling me that we should compare your achievement to my achievement. And I tell you that it is an exercise in mediocrity. And you find it difficult to understand that.
Okay. So that's why I said, so just before you go on the break, that's why I said that respectfully, the underpinning is wrong. You see, because this country that we are, there are things that have been built from long, and we are all chopping from it small. Like Reverend Obofo says, Brother Yesu Yani didn't know. But the thing is this, just by the by, your ability to even create resources also goes down to the vision question. So, for instance, Vice President Bawumia led this effort with the Chinese to say that we want you to give us up to 2 billion. And this is very important. The wording is up to 2 billion. People often say, give us $2 billion worth of investment. No, up to $2 billion worth of investment.
What's the difference?
No, an allowable limit. So we could draw up to 1 billion and say, we thank you very much. We could draw up to 1.5 billion and say, we thank you very much. But we will proposition projects up to $2 billion. Now, in that up to $2 billion, we will pay you this way. If this kind of thinking is not available to another government, you may not have enough fiscal room to even implement. Do you understand? Somebody comes in and says, but you have borrowed at 7% or 8% over a certain time frame. That time frame is much shorter than it should be. So let's go back to the bonds market, realign the finances or the borrowing so that we can get it for, let's say, 4% and get it over 20 years or 30 years so that we can have wriggle room in the fiscal space. That also must be to the credit of the person who is ruling. So resources are not finite only because people are more creative in the way they come by resources.
Okay, so unfortunately, our time is up for this conversation. I know there's a lot more to talk about. Yes, it's been 1 hour already.
Is that right?
It's been 1 hour already. So I really wanted us to talk about the finances aspect of projects and all that, but I'm sure we can continue with this conversation another day. It's possible we can have a part 2 of this conversation. So I'm really grateful to you guys for joining us. I've been doing today's Press Pass, the edition, the 20th of October edition of Press Pass with Emmanuel Wilson. Emmanuel Wilson is the chief crusader, Crusaders Against Corruption Ghana. And today, as he was talking, you could see that he's a real crusader against corruption. And Kojo Frimpong is government spokesperson on infrastructure. Everything shows that he's got his briefs on infrastructure. My name is Wilberforce Asare. I thank you very much indeed for the courtesy of your company.